I called the number listed. A man answered. HOA enforcement officer. Sounded bored out of his mind. Sir, the board requires approval for any exterior modification. I fixed a window. That qualifies. I hung up. I didn't know it yet, but that was the start of a war. At night, I'd sit on the back porch and watch the lake. Still water, the kind of quiet that makes you forget about the world. I'd picture it finished, fresh paint, new dock, maybe host local veterans on weekends. I started keeping a journal, sketches of how I'd restore every room. It wasn't just a project. It was healing. But every day brought something new. Letters taped to my gate, threats of fines, anonymous complaints about noise, trash, even the color of my truck. The HOA had eyes everywhere. And Darlene? She'd drive by slow, pretending to check mailboxes, staring like she was counting the nails I used. Month 3. I finally got my permits from the county. Legit. Signed, stamped, filed. The morning I started roofing work, a white SUV rolled up, county logo on the side. A man stepped out, holding a red paper. Stop work order. Violation of Municipal Code 16B. I read it twice. The section didn't even exist. Who reported this? He looked uneasy. Anonymous tip. From the Lakeview HOA. I called the county office myself. They had no record. Fraudulent paperwork. That night, I found out Darlene's brother-in-law worked in the planning commission. Weeks turned into months. My savings drained into fines and appeal fees. They even placed a lien on the property, completely fake, but it scared the bank enough to pause my renovation loan. I started sleeping in my truck, guarding the site. Someone kept leaving trash bags on my porch filled with construction debris. Once, I found asbestos warnings printed on them, like they were trying to frame me. I knew what this was. It wasn't about rules. It was about control. One afternoon, I found tire tracks leading behind the shed. A man was dumping crushed drywall, unmarked bags. I ran over, shouting. He jumped in his truck and sped off, but I caught the company name on the side, Van Camp Realty Maintenance. That's when it clicked. They weren't just harassing me. They were setting me up. I reported it to the sheriff. He nodded, said he'd look into it. 3 weeks later, the same deputy showed up with a citation accusing me of illegal dumping. That night, I sat on the porch, hands shaking. I almost packed up and left. Almost. But I could still hear my grandmother's voice. Never leave a home you've built with your own hands. So I stayed, and I started fighting back. I bought 4 security cameras, wired them across the property, installed motion lights, recorded every visit, every car that stopped by. I even started carrying my old body cam from my Navy days. The first footage I caught, Darlene's SUV parked outside at midnight. She got out, flashlight in hand, taking pictures through my fence. I didn't confront her, not yet, because I knew I'd need more. So when I saw those bulldozers that morning, I wasn't surprised. I was ready. I walked straight up to the foreman. Who signed this order? He handed me a paper. HOA letterhead. Darlene's signature. No county seal. No permit. I hit record on my phone and said, "You're trespassing on private property. This demolition is illegal." He froze. The workers exchanged looks. Ma'am Van Camp said she got court approval. She lied. I called 911 on speaker. By the time the deputy arrived, half the porch was gone, but I had the proof. That night, I sat in the truck with my dog, watching the house crumble in the headlights. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. I had the videos, the papers, and a list of every single thing Darlene had done. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about every homeowner she'd bullied, every veteran she'd called a charity case, every single lie she'd written on official letterhead. And I was going to make her answer. They thought they could break me, but I've built things in war zones. You don't scare a man who's already buried his ghosts. They say justice is blind. But in this town, it wore perfume and pearls, and its name was Darlene Van Camp. After the demolition, I filed every report I could. Trespassing, property destruction, fraud. The sheriff took my statement, nodded politely, and filed it under ongoing investigation. Weeks went by. No arrests. No follow-up. That's when I realized something. Darlene didn't just run the HOA. She ran the county. A small town's queen. If you've never lived in a small American lakeside town, let me explain something. There's always someone who thinks they own the place. They sit on every committee, sponsor every fair, donate to every campaign. Their names are on plaques, benches, and brick walls. That was Darlene. She'd been president of the Lakeview HOA for 14 years straight, owned a real estate firm, chaired the planning commission, and hosted Sunday brunch for half the city council. Every ribbon cutting, every photo op, she was there in heels and pearls, smiling like she built the whole town herself. Her motto? Protecting property values and preserving the lake's legacy. Sounds noble, right? But under that, she ran the HOA like a private fiefdom. Selective enforcement, nepotism, kickbacks from contractors she recommended. And if you questioned her, your mailbox disappeared, your fence violated setback rules. Your life became paperwork hell. So when a disabled Navy vet bought the mansion she wanted, it wasn't just about money. It was about control. After the demolition day, I knew I couldn't rely on the sheriff. So I called someone who still believed in truth. My old Navy buddy, Ron Beckett, now a VA legal liaison. He drove 3 hours to meet me at a diner near the lake. Big guy, gray beard, still wore his dog tags under a flannel. He listened while I laid out everything. The fake fines, the stop work orders, the lien, and now the illegal demolition. He sipped his coffee, then leaned back. Marcus, this woman's dirty. You're going to need more than proof. You'll need exposure. Ow! He grinned. Find someone who hates her as much as you do. That's how I met Erin Hayes, a local investigative reporter. She ran a blog called The Waterline Watch, mostly covering fishing permits and zoning news. But when I showed her my footage of the demolition, her eyes widened. You're telling me the HOA president forged a demolition order? Not just forged, carried it out. She asked for copies of everything. The letters, the fines, even the voicemail where Darlene told me to accept reality. Within a week, Erin published the first story. Veterans' historic home illegally demolished by HOA president. It went viral locally. Thousands of shares. And that's when Darlene called me. I was painting what was left of the fence when the phone rang. Her voice was calm, almost motherly. Marcus, dear, I wish you hadn't gone to the press. These things are misunderstandings. Misunderstanding, I said. You demolished my house. It was condemned. By who? She paused. By me. Acting in the community's best interest. That's when she dropped the threat, sugar-coated like honey. If you withdraw your complaint and stop spreading misinformation, I can help you. The board might even approve your new renovation plans. Otherwise, the fines will continue, and trust me, they add up fast. I hung up. That was her mistake. She thought I was afraid of losing money. But what she didn't know, I'd already lost a lot more in my life. Erin's article opened floodgates. Emails poured in from homeowners all over Lakeview Estates. Stories of harassment, fines, anonymous reports that ruined people's credit. One woman, Carol Price, told me Darlene forced her to replace her porch railing 4 times in 2 years because it didn't match community tone. A retired couple said she'd threatened to condemn their shed for unapproved paint color. Everyone had the same line in their letters. She thinks she owns the lake. The next week, I noticed tire marks on my driveway again. My mailbox was smashed. My tires slashed. Sheriff's office said could have been kids. Sure, kids who also printed fake HOA letters warning my veteran status does not exempt compliance. Then came the real hit, the utility shutoff. One morning, I turned on the tap. Nothing. Power? Gone. County Utilities told me they received official notice of property vacancy from Lakeview HOA. I sent them Erin's article and my ownership deed. They reinstated service that afternoon. But the message was clear. Darlene wanted me gone. 2 weeks later, I got an email from Darlene herself. Mr. Jennings, the board invites you to a special hearing regarding your property status. I knew it was a setup, but I went. The Lake Housen's meeting room was full. 20 homeowners, board members, and at the front, Darlene in a lavender blazer. Her smile was the same, polite, poisonous. Mr. Jennings, she began, you've caused quite a stir. Negative press damages our reputation. Let's settle this quietly. She slid a folder across the table. Inside, a buyout offer, $160,000, barely above what I'd paid. I looked her dead in the eye. You want to buy back what you destroyed? Her tone sharpened. Take the offer, or I'll make sure your property remains uninhabitable. The room went silent. I turned on my body cam, resting my hand on the table. Could you repeat that, for the record? Her eyes flickered. Then she laughed, that fake, high-pitched laugh people use when they just realize they slipped. She leaned close and whispered, "You don't belong here, Marcus. People like you never last long by the lake." That night, I sat in the truck replaying the audio. Her voice, her threat, proof. I sent it to Erin. Within hours, she wrote a follow-up piece. HOA president threatens disabled veteran in recorded meeting. This time, it wasn't just local news. It got picked up by regional outlets, then a national veterans network. And that's when the real cracks started showing. HOA board members began resigning, quietly, one by one. Some sent me anonymous tips, emails, memos, copies of Darlene's personal real estate deals tied to renovation approvals. She'd been using HOA funds to pay contractors who funneled kickbacks through her company. One of the names on the invoices? Her brother-in-law, the same guy at the planning office. Erin and Ron helped me compile everything. We built a case thick enough to choke a courtroom. But before we could file, Darlene struck again. At the next HOA meeting, one I wasn't invited to, she introduced an emergency bylaw authorizing removal of abandoned structures posing safety hazards. In plain English, she gave herself permission to demolish any property she personally deemed unsafe. Guess whose house was first on the list? Thornhill Manor. She had the motion passed in 10 minutes. No county oversight, no vote from the wider membership. Then she sent the order to a contractor she'd used before. And 5 days later, I came home to bulldozers. After Erin published the demolition footage, the town turned on Darlene. Even her allies began denying involvement. The mayor's office issued a statement distancing itself from unauthorized HOA activity. People started picketing HOA headquarters, mostly retirees with homemade signs. "We pay dues, not dictators. Hands off our homes." But Darlene didn't step down. She doubled down. She went on local TV. Calm, confident, rehearsed. On-screen recreation, Darlene at a press conference. "Our association acted only out of safety concerns," she said. "This veteran is exploiting his service to attack a respected community organization." That line hit me hard, not because of the insult. I'd heard worse in uniform, but because she said it with zero shame. If she wanted war, I'd give her one. Ron helped me draft a formal complaint to the state's Department of Community Affairs, the agency overseeing HOAs. Erin arranged interviews with other victims. We had timelines, emails, contracts, voice recordings, and one key piece of evidence: a payment receipt for the demolition contractor signed before the bylaw was approved. That meant premeditation, a crime, but I still needed her to admit it herself. A week later, she called again, same calm tone as before. "Marcus, we need to talk privately. Off the record." I met her at the Lakeview gazebo at sunset. Public place, open air, cameras rolling under my jacket. She showed up in a white blazer, designer sunglasses, holding a manila envelope. "I can make this all go away," she said softly. "I've spoken to the bank. The lien can be removed. Your loan can be reinstated. You'll get a rebuild permit." I kept quiet. "In return," she continued, "you'll sign this confidentiality agreement and publicly thank the board for resolving misunderstandings." I asked, "And if I don't?" Her smile thinned. "Then I'll see to it that your VA benefits come under review. I have friends in federal offices, you know." That's when I opened my jacket, showing the blinking red light of the recorder. Her face went pale. She stepped back, voice shaking. You can't record me like that." "Actually," I said, "in this state I can." She turned and walked off fast, heels clicking on the dock planks. I sent the footage straight to Erin and Ron. We uploaded it to multiple drives, time-stamped, geotagged. By morning, it was everywhere. National outlets called. Talk shows wanted interviews. The Department of Justice's Veteran Affairs Division even reached out. Darlene's empire began collapsing. The Planning Commission suspended her brother-in-law. The HOA board dissolved under emergency state oversight. But for me, it wasn't over yet. because all I wanted was my house back. 3 months later, the county judge ruled in my favor, declared the demolition illegal, ordered restitution for damages and emotional distress, $480,000, and full authority to rebuild without HOA interference. When the gavel hit the bench, I didn't cheer. I just exhaled. Darlene didn't show up to court. Her lawyer did, pale, sweating, muttering something about health issues. A week later, news broke she'd resigned from every position. Then came the indictment: fraud, extortion, abusive office. I remember standing there, watching new beams go up where ashes used to be. People from the community came by, the same neighbors she'd scared into silence. They brought coffee, sandwiches, even offered to paint. Turns out, the lake wasn't hers after all. It belonged to everyone. When you fight corruption long enough, you learn something. Bullies don't fear the law. They fear the light. And I was just getting started shining it. I thought winning in court would be the end. Turns out, it was just halftime. They say peace comes after victory. But in my case, peace brought silence, and silence is where enemies regroup. 2 weeks after the ruling, I started rebuilding Thornhill Manor. New lumber, fresh permits, clean start. The neighbors waved when they passed by. For the first time in months, I felt something close to normal. Then one night, I heard footsteps outside. Not coyotes, not wind, heavy boots on gravel. I looked out the window. A figure stood by the dock, flashlight beam cutting across the lake. When I yelled, they ran. But before disappearing into the dark, they tossed something toward the house. A dead fish, wrapped in a plastic bag with a note that said, "You should have left." I didn't sleep that night. I didn't call the sheriff either. I already knew how that'd go. Instead, I checked my cameras. Same SUV, same license plate. Darlene's nephew. She might have lost the courtroom, but she still had people who believe in her lies. Public war. The story had spread beyond the town now. National news ran the headline: Veteran exposes HOA corruption, faces retaliation. My inbox was flooded. Messages from veterans, homeowners, even lawyers offering free help. But for every word of support, there was hate too. You ruined our property values. You should be grateful you were offered money. Stop playing the victim. Darlene might have been indicted, but she still had her defenders. People who'd rather believe a polished lie than an uncomfortable truth. I'd fought wars overseas, but nothing prepared me for the kind fought in boardrooms and Facebook groups. The city hearing. A month later, the county held a public hearing to review HOA oversight laws. Erin, the journalist, called me. "You need to speak," she said. "They're trying to rewrite the rules to protect people like her." So I went. The hearing room was packed. Developers, mayors, attorneys. And right there in the second row, Darlene. Not arrested yet, out on bail, dressed in all white like some kind of saint. When it was my turn, I stood up. My leg ached, my palms were sweaty, but my voice didn't shake. I served 20 years building homes for other people's safety. And when I finally tried to build my own, I was treated like a criminal. All because one person thought power meant ownership. The room went still. A few people clapped softly, then louder. By the end, the whole place stood. I glanced at Darlene. She didn't clap. She didn't move. But I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Fear. The backlash. 2 nights later, my tires were slashed again. Same SUV spotted fleeing the scene. Then a fire. Someone torched a pile of scrap lumber by my fence line. If my dog hadn't barked, it could have spread to the house. The sheriff's deputy sighed, clipboard in hand. Could be a random vandal, Mr. Jennings. Random vandals don't drive HOA board members' trucks, I said. He didn't reply. I realized then, some people wear uniforms not to serve, but to protect the powerful. Breaking point. Weeks went by. I kept rebuilding, but the stress was eating at me. The VA counselor said I looked exhausted. I laughed. You should see my property. But inside, I was breaking. I'd fought so long to keep my grandmother's dream alive, and all it brought me was war. Then one night, I found myself sitting on the dock with a bottle I shouldn't have opened. Moonlight on the water, everything quiet. For the first time, I wondered if it was worth it. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Erin. Turn on channel 8. I did, and there she was. Darlene's interview. Local news. Darlene sitting comfortably in a studio chair, smiling at the camera. I've always acted in the best interest of this community, she said. That man has defamed me. I received death threats. My family lives in fear. I laughed bitterly. The same woman who tried to ruin my life was now the victim. And people were eating it up in the comments. Then she said something that changed everything. I never forged any documents. In fact, the demolition order came directly from the planning office. That was new. Aaron called right away. Marcus, if she's shifting blame to the county, that means she's hiding something. Let's dig. And dig we did. Ron used his VA contacts to get access to county archives. Buried deep in a digital folder labeled Community Development was a PDF, a scanned letter approving the demolition. Signature, Thomas K. Van Camp. Her brother-in-law. Stamp date, 1 week before the emergency bylaw even existed. Forgery, fraud, abuse of process, all rolled into one. But it wasn't just about my house. We found 5 other demolitions authorized the same way. Every one of those properties bought by Darlene's real estate company within 90 days of demolition. She'd been running a full-blown land grab scheme. We didn't go to the cops this time. We went to the people. Aaron organized a press conference at the courthouse steps. Microphones everywhere. Local, regional, even national stations. I stood beside her, folder in hand. When she finished her statement, she looked at me and nodded. I stepped up to the mic. I fought for this country to protect our homes and our rights, not so that someone in pearls could steal them with a pen. I held up the printed emails, the forged orders, the proof. The crowd gasped, flashes fired, and by sunset, the story hit national headlines. That night, federal investigators moved in. It was raining when they came for her. I stood across the street from her mansion, neat lawn, flag waving in the drizzle. 2 unmarked cars pulled up. Agents walked to the door, calm and professional. She stepped out in a gray coat, still holding her head high. Reporters shouted questions. Ms. Van Camp, do you deny the charges? She didn't answer. For a moment, our eyes met across the road. No words, just a long, cold stare. And for the first time, she looked small. As they drove her away, I finally breathed. The county suspended the entire HOA board. State oversight took control. Investigators confirmed Darlene's real estate kickback scheme had stolen over $2 million across 12 years. News anchors called it the Lakeview scandal. Neighbors who once avoided me stopped by with coffee and pies. One old man said, "We should have stood up sooner." I didn't say it, but I agreed. Months passed. The smell of fresh would fill the air. The sound of hammers echoed across the lake, a sound that once haunted me, now healing. I kept one beam from the old house, the one with my grandmother's initials carved in it, EJ. I built it right into the new mantle. Every nail I drove in felt like reclaiming something, not just the house, but my peace. When Thornhill Manor finally stood tall again, we held an open house for local veterans. Grilled burgers, laughter, kids running around the dock. The mayor came, awkward but sincere. Even a sheriff stopped by, quiet apology in his eyes. Ron raised a toast. To Marcus, for proving that home isn't where you live, it's what you stand for. People clapped. I didn't know what to say, so I just looked out at the lake, the reflection of the lights dancing on the water, and whispered, "We did it, Grandma." You know, when I first bought this place, I thought I was just fixing an old house. But I ended up fixing something bigger, a broken system, a scared community, and a part of myself I didn't know was still fighting. Darlene thought she owned the lake. But the truth? No one owns water. No one owns peace. You can only earn it. I thought that was the end. But what happened next turned a local story into a movement. Fade to black. They say after every storm comes peace. But nobody tells you peace is when you finally start hearing the echoes. The house was finished. The papers signed. The woman who tried to destroy me was facing trial. By all means, I'd won. But something about it didn't feel like victory. It felt unfinished. The unexpected visit. 3 weeks after the arrest, I was cleaning paint brushes in the yard when a black SUV pulled up. The man who stepped out wasn't a stranger. It was Detective Harris, county investigator. We'd spoken plenty during the case. He adjusted his jacket, looked uneasy. Mind if we talk inside? We sat at the kitchen table. He didn't touch the coffee I poured him. Marcus, off the record, someone inside the department's been leaking case files. Darlene's lawyer just submitted documents we haven't released yet. I frowned. You think she's got someone on the inside? He nodded slowly. We're checking every connection. But the timing, it's bad. How bad? She's claiming your journalist friend tampered with evidence. That you paid her. I laughed out loud. Paid her? With what money? My pension. But Harris didn't smile. She's trying to flip the narrative. You need to be careful who you trust. That line stuck with me. Who you trust. Later that week, I stopped by Erin's office. She was on the phone, arguing with someone, tension all over her face. When she hung up, I asked, "Everything okay?" She looked pale. Darlene's lawyer subpoenaed my notes. If I don't hand over sources, they'll charge me with obstruction. You can't give them anything. I won't, she said. But Marcus, one of your old neighbors, reached out to me. Said you offered him money to testify. I blinked. What? She showed me an email. From carolprice_realty@outlook.com. It was fake. I knew it immediately. Carol didn't even own a computer. But someone was impersonating me. I felt the room spin. Erin, they're setting me up. I know, she said quietly. And they're good at it. The next day, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, $20,000 in cash and a note. Walk away before this gets uglier. No one will blame you. I called Ron. He whistled when I told him. They're desperate. Keep that envelope sealed and time-stamped. Could be evidence of witness tampering. But something in my gut told me this wasn't random. It was coordinated. That night, I was on my porch when headlights rolled down the driveway. Another SUV. For a moment, I thought it was the cops again. Then she stepped out. Darlene. Out on bail. Same heels, same pearls, same unbothered smile. I stood there frozen, heart pounding. How the hell did you get past the restraining order? She shrugged. It only applies to harassment. This is just a conversation. Get off my property. She ignored me, walking closer. You don't understand, Marcus. I didn't do this alone. There are people who won't let you in. Like who? She smiled faintly. People you've already shaken hands with. For a moment, I didn't know if it was a threat or a warning. Then she handed me a folder, thick, sealed. Inside, bank statements, city approvals, signatures. Those, she said, prove I wasn't the only one. Planning officials, county clerks, contractors. You think I could pull all that off by myself? Why give this to me? She looked at me like I was the naive one. Because if I go down, they'll bury me. But if you expose them, they'll bury you. And then she turned and walked away. I just stood there, folder in hand, the sound of her heels fading into the night. I didn't sleep. I sat at the table till sunrise, staring at the documents. She wasn't lying. The signatures were real. County officials, HOA auditors, even 2 contractors I'd hired. They'd all signed off on fraudulent payments tied to my case. It meant one thing. She was part of a much bigger web, and I was standing in the middle of it. If I turned the evidence over, it could blow open half the county government, but could also destroy the credibility of my own case. Everything I'd fought for would be questioned. I called Ron. He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, Marcus, you wanted truth. Well, now you've got it. Erin and I met at the diner that afternoon. I told her everything, slid the folder across the table. She read in silence, eyes narrowing. This is a bombshell. If we publish this, it'll take down more than just her. I nodded, and maybe take me down too. Then she flipped to the last page, a signature underlined twice. Her eyes widened. Marcus, this one's from Detective Harris. The same man who warned me to watch who I trust. It hit like a gut punch. The leaks, the sudden subpoenas, the fake emails. He wasn't warning me. He was covering his tracks. Erin leaned forward. We can't go to local law enforcement anymore. We take this federal. We sent everything to the DOJ contact who'd handled the veteran rights inquiry months earlier. Within 48 hours, the feds descended on the county offices. Computers seized. Phones confiscated. Half the planning board placed on leave. And then the news broke. Federal probe expands Lakeview HOA scandal. County officials implicated. Names I'd known for years were on that list. People who smiled at church, waved at the grocery store. People who'd watched me rebuild and said, "Good for you, Marcus." Turns out, they'd been signing off on Darlene's deals the whole time. Harris was arrested first. Fraud, bribery, obstruction. He'd been feeding her information in exchange for kickbacks, property shares, hush money, even vacations. When they cuffed him, he didn't look at me, didn't say a word. Then came the contractors, the clerks, the finance auditor, one after another. And at the center of it all, Darlene. The woman who'd claimed she acted in the community's best interest now faced racketeering charges. But it still didn't feel done, because somewhere deep down, I knew she'd save herself a card to play. The final meeting. 2 months later, I got a letter from her attorney. She wanted to meet, privately, before the sentencing hearing. My lawyer said don't do it. Aaron said record it. Ron said pray first. I did all three. We met in the county jail's visitation room. No cameras, just plexiglass and static. She looked smaller this time. The pearls were gone. The makeup too. Just a woman staring back at a man she couldn't break. "You got what you wanted," she said quietly. "Congratulations." "I didn't want revenge, Darlene. I wanted the truth." She tilted her head. "Truth doesn't exist. Only stories people believe." "Then why give me the folder?" She smiled faintly. "Because you believed yours too much. You think you won because you're good. You won because you were lucky." She leaned closer to the glass. "Those people, they'll be replaced. Power never disappears, Marcus. It just changes names." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then she said something that froze me cold. "I read your grandmother's letters in that old desk we took. She sounded kind. Shame you turned out nothing like her." I stood up. "Goodbye, Darlene." As I walked away, she called out, "Enjoy the lake, soldier." It's only calm till the next storm. The courtroom was packed. Darlene pled guilty to 5 counts: fraud, extortion, conspiracy, and witness tampering. 25 years without parole. The others got less, but the message was clear. Lakeview's reign was over. When the judge asked if I wanted to speak, I said one thing. I'm not here to celebrate someone's fall. I'm here to remind every homeowner who ever got bullied by a board or a letter or a lie. You have rights. Stand your ground. Applause rippled through the room. But all I could think of was the lake waiting outside. Weeks later, Aaron and Ron joined me at the dock. We sat quietly, watching the sun go down. No speeches, no cameras this time. Aaron finally broke the silence. "You realize, Marcus, you didn't just win a case. You started a movement." I looked at her. "A movement?" She nodded. "Homeowners from across the country are contacting us. They're exposing corrupt HOAs, filing lawsuits, demanding reform. They're calling it the Thornhill effect." I smiled faintly. "That's my grandma's name." Ron chuckled. "Guess she's still working through you, old man." We laughed, quietly, the kind of laughter that comes when a storm finally passes. Months later, the house was more than just a home. We turned it into a community space, woodworking workshops for veterans, art classes, even Sunday barbecues. People came from towns I'd never heard of just to see where it all began. One day a young man walked up, maybe 20, nervous. "Mr. Jennings? I read your story online. My dad lost his house to a crooked HOA. You gave him hope." He handed me an envelope, a handwritten letter from his father. I didn't read it right away. I just nodded and said, "Tell your dad I said, keep building." They called it the Lakeview War. But wars aren't always fought with guns. Sometimes they're fought with truth, persistence, and a stubborn refusal to back down. I used to think strength was what you carried on your back. Turns out it's what you refuse to drop, even when you're tired, scared, and alone. Darlene was right about one thing. Power doesn't disappear. But maybe this time it's in better hands. I thought it ended there, but something unexpected came next. A letter that changed everything again. Every strike, every nail, every coat of paint, that was my therapy. By the time Thornhill was finished, I didn't just see a house. I saw survival, but I never imagined what came next. It arrived one quiet afternoon. Plain white envelope, no return address. The handwriting stopped me cold. Old-fashioned cursive, the kind my grandmother used. Inside was a short note on yellowed stationery. Marcus, if you're reading this, I guess you finally found Thornhill. I left something behind for you, and for anyone who believes a house can hold heart. Look under the floorboard beneath the fireplace. EJ. My hands trembled. That fireplace had been rebuilt from scratch. Still, I went inside, grabbed a crowbar, and pried up the first plank. Beneath it, wrapped in faded oilcloth, was a small wooden box. Inside, a photograph of my grandmother standing on the porch in 1951, smiling beside a man in work boots and suspenders. My grandfather. And under that, a folded letter and an old brass key. This house was built by hands that refuse to give up. If it ever falls, rebuild it. Not for yourself, but for those who still need a place to start again. That was her legacy. And suddenly, I knew what I had to do. That night, I sat with Ron and Aaron at the kitchen table, the same spot where I'd once planned my defense. Now it was covered in notes, coffee cups, and one big idea. We used the restitution money, I said. All of it. Create a fund for local students, kids who want to learn trades. Carpenters, electricians, welders. Ron smiled. Call it the Thornhill Foundation. I shook my head. No, the Estelle Jennings Memorial Scholarship. Grandma's name belongs on this, not mine. Aaron leaned back, smiling. From war vet to whistleblower to philanthropist. You sure like plot twists. I laughed softly. Nah, just finally building something that lasts. 3 months later, we held the first community ceremony on the lawn. Local press showed up, cameras rolling. Dozens of families came, some still wearing work uniforms, others in Sunday clothes. Kids played by the dock while veterans manned the grill. I stepped up to the microphone. 5 years ago, I bought a house that everyone said was cursed. Turns out, it wasn't cursed. It was waiting for someone stubborn enough to care. I looked around at the crowd. Neighbors, friends, people who once called me the troublemaker. This scholarship isn't about me. It's about second chances. Because no one should lose their home or their hope to corruption or fear. Applause rolled across the yard like thunder. For once, it wasn't about anger. It was about rebuilding. That fall, 5 students received full trade school scholarships. One was a quiet kid named Luis. His father had worked construction on Thornhill after the demolition. He shook my hand and said, "My dad said this house made him believe good people still win." I swallowed hard. That was worth more than any settlement check. Aaron's story. Aaron's reporting earned state awards. She used the recognition to start an investigative journalism nonprofit, the Waterline Project. It trained young reporters to hold local power accountable. One day, she told me, "You changed how people see small-town stories." Turns out, corruption doesn't hide in skyscrapers. It hides in cul-de-sacs. I laughed. Guess you found your next headline. Ron eventually moved back to Maine, bought a cabin near the coast. Before he left, he stopped by Thornhill one last time. He looked around the finished living room, the sunlight through the tall windows, the mantel with Grandma's initials. "You did it, brother," he said. "You built something real." He handed me his old dog tags. For the wall. Not for memory, for reminder. I hugged him. "Stay out of trouble." He grinned. "Trouble's your department now." Months later, I got a letter from the state prison. I didn't open it right away. Took me 2 days. Inside was a single line, typed neatly. "You were right. The lake was never mine. D. No apology. No justification. Just acknowledgement." And that was enough. I burned the letter that night, watched the ashes drift over the water. For the first time, I felt peace. By the following spring, the new mayor came to tour the property. Younger guy, sleeves rolled up, earnest. "We're drafting new HOA accountability laws," he said. "Your case set the precedent." He paused, looking at the rebuilt house. "I never thought one veteran could change county policy." I smiled. "That's where you're wrong. One person can't change everything, but they can make it impossible to ignore." Aaron convinced me to record a documentary, Thornhill, the house that fought back. I didn't like cameras, but she said it wasn't about me. It was about the story. The day it premiered online, I sat in the same chair where Grandma used to hum. The opening line was mine. "You can tear down walls, but you can't bulldoze truth." Within weeks, the film hit millions of views. Emails poured in from every state: veterans, single parents, retirees, people who'd been bullied by their own HOAs. They sent photos of their homes, their protests, their victories. It hit me then. Thornhill wasn't just a house. It had become a symbol. Every year now, on the anniversary of the rebuild, the community gathers at the lake. We call it homecoming. No speeches, no cameras, just people grilling, laughing, sharing stories. This year, an old woman came up to me. "You don't know me," she said, "but my husband served with you overseas. He passed last year. Your story kept him going during chemo." I didn't know what to say. She handed me a folded flag, one she said he'd wanted displayed here. Now it hangs in the foyer, right beside Grandma's photograph. I used to think I bought Thornhill to fix something broken in the world. Truth is, I was the one who needed fixing. The house taught me patience. The fight taught me courage. And the people, they reminded me why we rebuild it all. Sometimes justice doesn't come from courtrooms or cameras. It comes from standing up quietly when you've got every reason to sit down. If you ever find yourself staring at ruins, literal or otherwise, don't walk away. Pick up a hammer, lay one board, then another, and keep going until it feels like home again. Because no HOA, no bully, no storm can stop a builder's heart. In memory of Estelle Jennings, 1925 to 2003. The Thornhill Foundation continues to fund trade scholarships across 5 counties. Over 300 homes have been restored nationwide through community initiatives inspired by this story. You ever come home to find your dream being torn apart? Literally? That was me, the morning I came back to Thornhill Manor. The sky was gray, cold wind off the lake. I remember stepping out of my truck, boots crunching over gravel. And there was my house, half gone. A yellow bulldozer idle by the porch. 2 men in reflective vests stood near the rubble, one sipping coffee like it was just another Tuesday. My stomach dropped. I yelled, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" They didn't answer, just looked at me like I was some stranger trespassing on my own land. I took a few steps closer, my legs stiff from the Old Navy injury. One of them finally said, "Sir, you can't be here." The HOA ordered a demolition. HOA. That one word hit like a punch. I felt heat rising to my face. The HOA? You mean Darlene? The guy looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am Van Camp." "Yeah." Said it was condemned. Condemned. I laughed, because if I didn't, I'd start swinging. Condemned by who? I just passed an inspection. 2 weeks ago, I was inside painting the damn kitchen. I walked past them, ignoring their warnings. Dust filled the air. My grandmother's old window frames were lying in pieces. And right in the center of it all, a single chair from the dining room, still standing. She used to sit there and hum old gospel songs when I was a kid. I pulled out my phone, started recording, because I knew exactly who was behind this. Darlene Van Camp. "I hope you're watching," I whispered. Then the screen fades to black. They say every story has a beginning, but mine didn't start with a hammer or a saw. It started with silence, the kind that echoes in old houses. When I bought Thornhill Manor, the lake house had been empty for almost 30 years. Most people called it cursed. I called it home. I'd spent 20 years in the Navy Seabees, building bases in the middle of nowhere. When I got out, hip injury, pension, and more nightmares than sleep, I wanted peace. Something real to fix. Something solid. So when the county auction listed an abandoned 1920s lake mansion for $127,000, I didn't think twice. I remember unlocking that front door for the first time. The hinges screamed like a warning, but I just smiled. Dust everywhere, vines creeping through the windows, raccoon prints on the floorboards. And yet, it felt alive, like it was waiting for someone to believe in it again. On the mantel, carved into the wood, were the letters EJ. My grandma's initials. That's when I knew it wasn't coincidence. She used to tell me stories about the lake when I was little, how people used to dance on the porch of Thornhill Manor back when music came from record players. I promised her before she died that I'd find a home worth fixing. And there it was. The first time I met Darlene Van Camp was the next morning. She showed up before sunrise. A red SUV stopped by the gate, and out stepped a woman in heels. Hair sprayed stiff, clipboard in hand, sunglasses, even though the sun wasn't up yet. She smiled that neighborly smile people use when they're about to ruin your day. "You must be the new owner," she said. "I'm Darlene, HOA president of the Lakeview Estates." I nodded. "Nice to meet you. But I don't think this property's part of your HOA. Her smile froze. "Oh, everything along this lake falls under our association's jurisdiction, Mr. Jennings. Marcus Jennings." "Well, Mr. Jennings, we take great pride in maintaining the character of our community. If you plan to renovate, you'll need to submit architectural plans for approval." She handed me a glossy brochure, rules, regulations, fines. Pages and pages about paint shades and mailbox heights. I looked at the mansion behind me, half-rotted, birds nesting in the eaves, and couldn't help but laugh. "You want to see my paint samples before I fix a roof that's falling in?" She didn't laugh back. Her voice turned cold. "Everything goes through the board, Mr. Jennings. It keeps property values up." Then she said something I didn't catch until later meant everything. "Some of us worked hard to make this lake what it is. We can't just let anyone move in and change it." Anyone. She left, tires crunching the gravel like she owned it. 2 weeks later, I got a letter. Unauthorized renovation activity. Daily fine, $250. I hadn't even started real work yet. Just boarded up a few broken windows and cleared the driveway.